Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Roberto Corona. I am an anthroposopher and astrologer, and in this video we're going to talk about the ingress of Uranus in Gemini and the most important aspects that it's going to make, especially with the other generational planets. So on July 7, Uranus is going to enter Gemini, which is the mutable air sign, which by itself is all about change. But on top of that, change is precisely one of Uranus's main features, especially when it comes to sudden change, represented by the symbolism of the lightning bolt. So let's take a look right away to Uranus in Gemini main significations, and then talk about the aspects that it will be making in the sky. So as you know, Uranus represents technology, whereas Gemini represents short-term trips or usual trips, and in particular, Gemini rules means of transport. Now, if you think about it, we are already witnessing a revolution in this sense, with several prototypes, even bizarre ones, like the Kawasaki ride-on robot that you can see here. Not only that, we also have flying car-like drones or motorcycles, drones, and this goes in the direction of changing, revolutionizing not only the means of transport, but also the delivery of goods. Again, all things that we have already seen as concepts or prototypes, but that Uranus in Gemini could really bring to fruition, such as deliveries with drones. In fact, Gemini also represents the mail system, as well as, generally speaking, all types of markets. Speaking of markets in this regard, we could witness a revolution in the markets that could open up new trade routes or bring about Uranian upheavals, so to speak, to existing ones. And this is clearly a change that has been triggered this year by the attempt, now almost completely failed, by Donald Trump to impose tariffs on the international markets. In addition to that, Gemini represent networks of all kinds, including our nervous system, as well as neural networks developed by artificial intelligence. Now, this means that we can expect a pretty obvious at this point great progress in terms of AI development, as well as the development of neural interfaces between the human nervous system and machines carried out by companies such as Elon Musk's Neuralink. In this sense, we need to be very, very careful to the possible dangerous drifts of transhumanism. Another important Gemini signification is that represented by all means of communication, that in these 7 years will be most likely revolutionized by Uranus. Now, the challenge here concerns mass surveillance and mass manipulation, themes that hopefully Uranus in Gemini will lead us to face and resolve to free ourselves from these sort of slot machines that we carry in our pockets, because our phone with social media are definitely that. Now, last but not least, we have with Uranus in Gemini revolutions, riots, and protests, which we will see later on in this video, talking about the trine between Uranus and Pluto. But basically, we could witness new ways of protesting against the dominant powers. Now, before moving on to the aspects that Uranus will make with Pluto and Neptune, let's take a step back to talk about the 2020 Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that took place in the zodiac sign of Aquarius. Now, why the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction? What does it have to do with Uranus entering Gemini? Now, this conjunction represents a major paradigm shift that we have already talked about in previous videos. But basically, conjunctions between Jupiter and Saturn take place every 20 years or so in zodiac signs that are always of the same element. This means that before 2020, these conjunctions occurred in Earth signs, whereas starting from 2020, these conjunctions will now occur in air signs. Now, this passage from one element to another occurs approximately every 200 years. So 2020 definitely represents a paradigm shift from conjunctions in the earth element to conjunctions in the air element. Now, why is this so important? It is important because not only Uranus enters Gemini, which is an air sign, but as we know, Pluto is also in Aquarius, which is again an air sign. And it is also the zodiac sign affected by the last great conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn on 2020. Now, this is important because Uranus and Pluto form, as you can see in this picture here, a minor Grand Trine in air signs, right after this paradigm shift involving precisely the air element. By the way, this configuration is called a minor Grand Trine because a third planet, which is Neptune in Aries, is basically closing the trine with two sextile that you can see here, and this is the trine between Uranus and Pluto. You can also see Saturn with Neptune because we have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, and in addition to that, you can spot the square with Jupiter in Cancer that we've been talking about in a dedicated video. Now, how long is this minor Grand Trine going to last? Now, here you can see graphically with a tolerance of 4 degrees, the trine between Uranus and Pluto in green. You can see it here. We have this green wave. This is the trine between Uranus and Pluto. And up here in light blue, you have Uranus making a sextile with Neptune. Basically, we have between 2025 and 2028 the most intense passage of this planetary configuration. Now, let's talk about specifically the meanings of these two aspects of Uranus, the trine with Pluto and the sextile with Neptune. So let's start from the trine between Uranus in Gemini and Pluto in Aquarius, which, as we mentioned, concerns powerful protest and revolution movements. If we examine the historical events of the last, of the past in general, that occurred during this trine aspect between the two planets, we can talk about real attempts to subvert the political order, such as the foundation of the Chinese Communist Party in 1921, or the March on Rome of the Fascist Party in 1922, or even further back, in 1810 we had the beginning of the Mexican War of Independence and the May Revolution in Argentina. Regarding the United States specifically, which by the way have Uranus in Gemini in their chart, we have in 1773 the Boston Tea Party, the act of protest against the British Crown that will lead to American independence. So we also want to remember that Pluto was in Aquarius during the French Revolution, so definitely a big wave of revolutionary movements that we have with this trine here. Now, these movements in particular also involve media and issues regarding freedom of the press and freedom of speech. So we can expect a boost in investigative journalism, which will lead to igniting the spirits in that direction, as well as fights against, censorship and so on. On the positive side, this trine will bring an incredible push towards technical scientific development, and since Uranus represents electrical energy, whereas Pluto represents nuclear energy, we can expect new accomplishments in terms of energy production, and in particular the development of new nuclear fusion reactors, like the one you can see here in the picture, which, by the way, is not the current nuclear fission reactors that you can definitely find nowadays in facilities. Now, moving on to Neptune in Aries and its sextile with Uranus, that is going to fuel this trine, because we have this minor Grand Trine that is supported by Neptune. Basically, Neptune is going to contribute to this collective movements, fueling them with emotions, because as we know, Neptune is the planet of collective unconscious emotions. And this means that this planet will definitely support these revolutionary movements, fueling these emotions with a warrior imaginary that you can see here. And this imaginary is basically an Aries imaginary. So all these images of war and fighting, all of a sudden coming back, they're going to support these protests, this revolution. So the sextile between Neptune and Uranus goes in that direction, but not only in terms of emotions, but also in terms of ideals. In fact, as we have already seen, Neptune in Aries can lead to a great awakening of ideals, which in particular can also be spiritual ideals or Christian ideals, because Aries is the zodiac sign of the Christ. For this reason, the sextile supports the struggle both through emotions and through ideals. And in this regard, we have to be careful of possible fanatical drifts, which is the shadow side, the shadow aspect basically of Neptune in Aries. In conclusion, here's the major dates for Uranus in 2025, so you can take a look at this list if you wanted to get into the details. Uranus will enter Gemini on July 7, and of course we're going to talk about it as the planet is going to be triggered by the new moons and full moons later on. So as always, thanks for watching. If you want to support my work, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell not to miss out on future astrological insights. I am Roberto Corona. See you in the next video.